right, I think it's time to call the meeting to order. And the internet hasn't let me pull up the agenda yet, but I believe that Kayla's going to call the roll.
That's right. So I have received regrets from the following Transportation Commission members that are not able to join us this evening. Commissioner Trudeau is out of town. Commissioner Demetrio is attending a Board of Education meeting this evening, and Commissioner Guru Raja is not able to join us this evening as well. So for the remaining commission members, if you could please stay here when your name is called. Commissioner Felt.
Here.
Commissioner Fern.
Here.
Commissioner Gordon.
Here.
Commissioner Hall.
Here.
Commissioner Nahidi.
Here.
Commissioner Preston.
Here.
Commissioner Parsons.
Here.
Councilmember Smith. Commissioner Stoltz.
Here.
Commissioner Dolan.
Here.
Commissioner Riekstad. Sergeant Bill Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Cooper.
Here.
Commissioner Lazarus.
Here.
Commissioner Liu.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. We need to approve the agenda. So does anybody have any additions or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve. And if you could say your name when you do that, that will help with the taking of the minutes.
So moved. I'm Robert.
Thank you.
Seconded by?
Seconded by Missy Stoltz.
Thank you.
Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have an agenda. Great. So then we move on to public comment. And if you'd like to speak, we have 3 minutes set aside for that, which Kayla will time. So is there anybody who'd like to speak? Yes. Come on in. You can come up and sign in.
You have to sign in.
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Well, I had a stroke, so it's very hard to sign, but I will do what I can. Now, excuse my speech tonight. I've had some health issues, so it's not as clear as it once was when I was chair of the Planning Commission, but okay. Well, I'm sorry to see that Chip Smith isn't here. Now, he was called, and apparently he didn't call his regrets in. He's my council member. I met him out at Holmes Brewery the other day, just before the August primary, and he changed, on meeting him and finding out that he and my daughter had McAllister in common, he changed my vote. So our household gave him 2 extra votes in the August primary. Okay, well, I talked with him briefly, and I also met with the mayor on 2 occasions, and both seemed receptive to what I have proposed, and but the mayor counseled me and said that it's best with this idea to start with the Transportation Commission first before we proceed any further. I live on Chapin Street, which is just on the north side of West Park, and it's kind of a major thoroughfare for people cutting from the Waterhill neighborhood, from Huron and so forth. And I see a lot of, I've lived there for 32 years, and I've seen a lot of increase in traffic, which is understandable. Everybody has had that experience. But I've also seen increasing speeds. And I have a special needs daughter, and on my side of the street, there's 4 or 5 houses with children in them. And of course, there's a lot of activity in the park with Y taking advantage of it and so forth. So there's a lot of children around. Many of them are on the north side of the street, but some pedestrians occupy the south side, which is where my house is. And a few years back, I proceeded to try to get traffic calming on that street, noticing the increased speeds and so forth. And I went through the petition process and all of that. And it turned out that after everybody was in favor of our street, they measured the speed, and the letter came back to me saying you failed to qualify because you're 1 mile below whatever threshold. I think it was 30 or 35 miles per hour. I thought, well, what a dirty crying shame that was, But so I kind of forgot about it, but it's increased problems. And what I've decided or discerned is that it's the speeding traffic, the people that are excessively going beyond the speed limit, not just a little bit over, but really fast. And there are some of those people. They pose the greatest threat to pedestrians. So what I'm arguing for is that if a measurement could be made of speeding traffic, very fast speeding traffic, then I think they ought to qualify for traffic calming. And in this case, just one little hump. But nevertheless, I want you to think about possibly changing your ordinance or your requirements for traffic calming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't see anyone else who might be speaking to us, so we'll close the public commentary part. And the next part would be to improve the minutes, and I hope that you actually had a chance to read them. The link was bad for a little while.
Yes, Linda Diane did bring to my attention that the minutes were not linked correctly in the agenda, so that's been restored. I don't know if anyone else encountered trouble accessing them. Apologize for that. And so,
It's good now.
yes, it's good now. They're out there.
So it wasn't a test to see if you were really paying attention. So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Okay. And a second by Robert.
I'll second it.
Okay. So all those in favor, would say yes? Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, we have minutes approved. And so the old business that we will move into now is the CIP committee. And Cyrus and Brad have a presentation. I think, is your name spelled wrong there too? Sorry about that.
What?
You're in the agenda.
Oh.
You're Bradley. So go ahead.
Okay. I think that we've got 5 minutes for this, so I'll try and keep us on schedule. So there's two things, one of which we discussed last time at our August meeting. That was the committee recommendations. Unfortunately, we have not had a chance as a committee, all three of us, to meet, and also, more importantly, to meet with city staff, because city staff's recommendations are going to be, an important contingent of how those recommendations get, put forward. I'd like to thank Missy and Stephanie and everyone else who provided feedback, both written and verbal, either at last meeting or since. If you'd like to, you could still provide feedback. You may also find it more useful once there is one set of recommendations, unlike the confusion that precipitated from last meeting. So the plan is for us to tackle that on October's agenda. So the other piece of news for the CIP committee was Brad and I were able to meet with city staff about a project on Pauline Boulevard from Stadium to 7th. It's a combination water main and transportation project, so it'll be resurfacing. So a few things got discussed. So there'll be from the cities actually shared two sets of plans for the meeting tonight. We discussed both. The main thing that was part of those plans was enhanced crosswalks. The city has those planned for Arbordale and Redeemer. There is some question of whether the Arbordale location should be placed somewhere else. The non-motorized plan had it at Arella. Brad made a good suggestion to outreach to the community, especially the Eberwhite and the school children and parents area there that might have some input into whether that crosswalk should be at one or the other. Or the other piece that I think we spent more time talking about was the question of bike lanes and how the street is currently configured versus a possible proposed solution. Again, both of those were shared. The current condition and the one that the city staff is right now recommending, or at least considering before public input and possibly further analysis. But that is between Redeemer, specifically between Redeemer and 7th, not for the entire extent of the project, but between Redeemer and 7th. There's parking on both the north and south side of Pauline, and shared travel and bike lanes in each direction. And
Shared travel lanes, not bike lanes.
sorry, what I mean is, to clarify, there's a shared travel lane in both the east and west direction, and it's shared between vehicles and bikes. The alternative would be to remove, the city's recommendation was north parking lane. If that north parking lane was removed, space would be opened up for dedicated painted bike lanes. It'd be 2 5-foot bike lanes. It's actually pretty similar to the treatment that I believe is between Redeemer and Stadium. But because that segment's wider, it also has room for the south parking as well. So we suggested, proposing both to the Transportation Commission and opening both for public engagement, because, we essentially thought that there is, it's possible with how much parking may be being used, we may not need all parking on both sides of Pauline. In the past, I've seen parking studies done to sort of try and capture that on a more than anecdotal level. That's all we really have right now is anecdotal. And then after the meeting, Brad and I offered some more input to the staff. I'll wrap up very quickly because I'm almost at 5 minutes, but we provided a little bit more input. Brad, both at the meeting and after, sort of reiterated the importance of the non-motorized plan and its sort of, its vision for Pauline, whether it was, specifically the idea that the crosswalk might be located based on that. But also, one idea I suggested, and I didn't think of it until after the meeting, was the possibility of, if we keep one parking lane, making a protected bike lane. And it was entirely, what I said to city staff was, this is not an exhaustive engineering schematic. It was made with a pretty simple online GUI. But, by reducing the bike lanes to an acceptable NACTO, standard, and using parking protection, it's at least possible with that same street width to do a parking protected lane. I bring that up again just to start debate and discussion. I want that to be the kind of thing that, is sort of brought up for more debate and discussion in our commission and at design meetings. Whether or not that is what comes to bear for this project or others, obviously is going to be decided on a case-by-case basis with more analysis. But I only shared that, I think, with city staff today, so it's still relatively new to the hopper. But and that is, I think, it for the CIP committee. Apologies for running long.
Hoping to just clarify real quick, and you can see it in the notes that I think are drafted from that meeting. The city recommendation was for no bike lanes and parking instead on that section. We had to request to see the potential for an alternative with the bike lanes and parking removed on one side. So the city recommendation as of right now, as far as the CIP committee is concerned, is no bike lanes on that section. The other thing I want to point out is that after the meeting, I looked at the non-motorized transportation plan to see if I could find some evidence as to why that decision might have been made. What I found is that corridor is identified in the plan as a Tier 1 bicycle lane priority. So it's identified in the plan to be converted. The plan also indicates that Pauline from 7th to Main, it's recommended to include bike lanes and remove 1 lane of parking. So as I've been thinking about this more, I have to question why the city came together with the recommendation to keep the parking when the non-motorized transportation plan seems to indicate just the opposite. And I think that's something that I'd like an answer to. How did that decision actually get made? And where does the city stand right now on moving forward on Pauline?
So in terms of action, the next step, I don't think that we're in a position to discuss this tonight, but here I am, a member of the CIP committee, asking, will this be a future recommendation? You're going to have more conversation with the city? What's going to happen now? Or what are you suggesting happen?
I think the city needs to present to the entire commission personally on what their recommended proposal is going to be.
I think the first step, because that meeting was, relatively close to this commission meeting, was to simply share both sets of plans. But yes, we both highly recommended that they present to the commission. There'll be a public outreach, or public engagement, which will involve at least one session with the public.
Okay,
And ideally,
so you've got a specific question for the staff, and then we can look at putting that on a fairly quick basis to come back to us with actual proposals or some other. Is that?
So I think we can check with staff on staff availability to attend a future commission meeting. The intention was for this to be addressed through a committee meeting. That was the request at the last commission meeting, was that this be brought to the committee, not rather than the full commission. It would have been seen more as an either or than a both.
Okay,
but I can follow up with staff on availability to come back. I would also add that there is a public meeting that they're working on scheduling for October, which would be another opportunity.
Great.
All the commission members would be extended an invitation to attend that public meeting and provide comment towards the project in that way.
Yes.
I'm concerned if our meeting is after the date of the public meeting. Wouldn't we need to discuss this as a commission before it's presented to the public as the plan to have no bike lanes?
So I don't know what their public meeting date is. I don't know if they've set that yet. But whether or not it comes to the commission first, I think that at this point they're seeking feedback and input. There isn't going to be a decision made at a public meeting regarding bike lanes or not. It would be an opportunity to gather input, the same as with the commission. We're seeking input.
yeah.
And the CIP committee will meet before that public meeting as well, so that may be helpful in figuring out what we might propose.
I think this is one of those instances where I'd like to have the commission either endorse or not endorse the recommendation for Pauline, if that makes sense. And that can be the CIP committee, I suppose, endorsing that recommendation. Based on what I know right now, it's probably not going to endorse the current form of that plan.
Right. Well,
So I just don't want to, if we're able to publicly endorse this plan, or whatever the plan is for Pauline, I'd like that opportunity for this commission to do so.
Sure.
it would need to be the commission and not the committee, because the
Okay.
committee can't speak for the commission. Okay. All right, well, we
And-
can work that out then.
And I guess to sort of add and further address Stephanie's concern, because, even though there is a public session scheduled for October, that would still present us time to sort of, I suppose we would need to, get a sort of updated recommendation once they gather all their input. And then that can include further input from us as a full body, or, from any individual members of us who are, the CIP committee has already provided, I think, the input that it will until they provide, a response to that. But
Okay.
between now and October, it's not that by the next meeting it'll be a final design and our chances sailed. I think it's, I think by the next meeting there'll certainly be the opportunity to, basically do what Brad just said, and either endorse or not endorse, and it might not even be as soon as next meeting, frankly, that we have that option in front of us.
Okay.
if that makes sense.
And any other concerns, I'd be willing to hear them outside the meeting as far as the logistics of how to make this work as well.
One other just logistics-related item, all the commission members have at their desk, I guess, today was the copy of the notes from the CIP committee meeting and then the feedback that was transmitted by email from the committee to staff today. So those will be uploaded into Legistar and attached as part of the meeting minutes. So for anybody that may be viewing the CTN recording or looking for those materials that were referenced in Cyrus and Bradley's discussion, they will be electronically available.
Bunch more work for that committee. All right, I'd like to move on to the Speed Reduction Committee, and my understanding is that they have not yet met, and that will happen in the next couple of weeks. There are a couple of members of the public who have expressed some interest in serving on that committee. I'm new to this, but I think I basically will have the opportunity to sort of vet them in some way and then make a recommendation to the commission.
So as is identified in the bylaws of the commission, what Linda Dan's referring to is that members of the community outside of the commission can be appointed to a committee. So the way the bylaws read is that the chair has the authority to appoint commission or committee members, and the commission would then approve. So what we'll need is, the way I see it for process is Linda Diane can then suggest who she's heard from, who's interested in from the community and serving on that committee, but at a commission meeting would need to then make a motion and have a formal action on approving the roster. Once we have the roster for that committee, we can start looking at scheduling meetings.
So I apologize for that not happening sooner, but as most of you know, I've been literally as well as figuratively out of commission for the last 3 weeks, and things are a little bit behind, so we'll catch up quickly. Okay, anything else about that committee? Great. Then we're going to move on to the tree line, the Allen Creek and Urban Trail with Connie. And you've got 30 minutes.
So thank you very much for providing us this opportunity. I'm Connie Pulsifer. I'm the project manager for the City of Ann Arbor for the Tree Line Project. And with me today, and I'll have you come up here, is Oliver Kiley from Smith Group JJR, who is the project manager for our consultant team on this project. And we are delighted to be here to talk to you about our progress on the plan and hear your input. And I got to learn how to run this thing, right, Kayla?
Arrows, just with the arrow keys.
Just right? Okay. So what we're going to do is give you an overview of the project, talk a little bit about the tree line framework, implementation strategies, and next steps. Just to avoid any confusion, this project has previously been known as the Allen Creek Greenway. It has been rebranded as the tree line, so I'm doing my best to keep calling it the tree line.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
Just at the end of his presentation, we are going to vote on a resolution, so there will be action taken at that point.
Okay. Thank you. So first, a little bit of overview about the project. We are 95% complete. This has been almost a 2-year effort, but as many of you who've lived in the community are aware, this is a project that's been talked about in the community for the last 17 or so years, and there have been many, many plans developed. This process was a little different because this was a council priority, and City Council identified this project as a priority project in 2016 and allocated funding for staff to actually embark on a master plan, framework plan that would be adopted as an element of the city's master plan. The City Council recognized early on that we have really inadequate non-motorized connections from within the community and to the Huron River and south to the university's athletic campus. The objective of this master plan effort is to develop a plan that describes a feasible approach, and I want to emphasize feasible because as I said, we've talked about it in the community for years, and there's been a lot of vision about what this could be. This gave us a chance to really do a deep dive on what was feasible from many different perspectives, and we'll go into that as we talk about the plan. And we want to also we wanted to explore through this process the critical factors that made certain components of the trail feasible or not feasible. So first, the project study area and context was identified by City Council in a resolution as the north boundary being starting at Main Street at the border-to-border trail and extending all the way down to the south boundary at South State Street and Stimson. So that was the parameters of the study that we're working on right now.
Just so you know, the map is turned.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver. The biggest challenge on this project for the community is that north is to the right, always on this project, which is, you never want to do that on a plan, but it's that type of plan, so it has to fit on a screen. And so north is to the right in all of our plans. So this is all about making linkages within the community and creating a synergy between many important destinations within this study area, connecting to the Huron River frontage and natural areas by those big green dots that we show. Lots of clusters on the north end of the project, connecting to neighborhoods, the Old West Side, Water Hill, First Ward, the Old Fourth Ward, and the Lower Burns Park neighborhoods, connecting to businesses, to the core of the downtown, a really important component of this project, and to the Carytown area, and also connecting to the University of Michigan athletic campus, because we all know that's a really big, important destination for pedestrians, especially on game days. Other connections that are important are regional connections, and we have the border-to-border trail that exists, as you can see by the black and yellow dotted line along the river today. And it's important for us to make a connection to that trail because that trail makes a connection ultimately all the way out to Dexter and to the statewide Iron Bell Trail system. So this interconnectivity, not only locally, but regionally was an important component of this. And connecting to the city's bicycle network, sidewalks, and other non-motorized infrastructure. So some of I'm not going to read these key issues and considerations, but I want to draw your attention to numbers 3 and 4 in particular. I'm emphasizing tonight this whole idea about feasibility. In many of the past planning efforts and when the community came to us with this project, there was a vision for the trail to be almost entirely within the railroad corridor. From start to end, and we needed to determine whether that was really possible, both from a physical standpoint, and we needed to reach out to the rail companies to see what their feelings were about that. So this was really the first time that we made a significant connection with the rail owner, which is Watco Companies. They're a national freight line company, and with the rail company that runs on the rail, the Ann Arbor Railroad. And then importantly also is having an ongoing communication with these groups, because at the end of this process, we're not necessarily going to have an answer from them, but we've developed a relationship that we think is going to carry us very well into the next steps on this project. Just a snapshot of the City of Ann Arbor sustainability framework components and the community benefits that this project will bring are pretty significant, and I'll let you look through those. So the project process started, as I said, really 2 years ago, and then a year and a half ago in earnest, with us looking at issues and opportunities in the task one of the project, really understanding what's out there from an existing conditions standpoint, walking the trail with lots of groups, setting up our engagement structure in the very beginning days. So the engagement structure was really important to us because we needed input from the community at many levels, but we also needed a lot of technical input. And so we set up a structure that has worked out very well for us. We have a project management team that reaches across all units in the city, a technical advisory committee that's made up of people, staff within the city, but also in the county, who are able to bring particular perspective to this project from a transportation standpoint, stormwater standpoint, non-motorized perspective, utilities perspective. So we wanted to make sure they were all at the table from the very beginning. And then we had an open membership call for interest to form a citizen advisory committee. And that was also a very diverse group, of which you can see the membership in the links that Kayla gave you. We met with a lot of different stakeholder focus groups throughout the process, and then have had community-wide meetings through the process, which took us to task 2, where we looked at many route alternatives. Task 3, plan recommendations and strategies, and here we are now in task 4 with a draft master plan that has recently been approved by Planning Commission and City Council to be released to adjoining jurisdictions for their review, and we are also engaging boards and commissions in the city at this point as well. I'm going to turn it over to Oliver now, who will go through the tree line framework.
Thanks, Connie. So there's a lot of content in here. I'm going to hit it at a fairly high level. Hopefully you've had a chance to either look at this presentation or the master plan document itself, and I'm happy, afterwards during discussion we can jump back to slides if we need to. So a couple things, as Connie mentioned, there's sort of a shift in the language and the thinking about this from the Allen Creek Greenway to this tree line and identifying that as an urban trail. There's different visions that have been kind of floating around for the Allen Creek Greenway and now the tree line. And so a lot of our work with the CAC was spent sort of talking about that shift, and a lot of it comes back to that question of sort of feasibility. There are a lot of great ideas for doing big, broad, expansive greenway treatments throughout the floodplain and along where the Allen Creek is, but we were really tasked with finding out what's that feasible connection that we can use as kind of a spine to build that connection to the Huron River, to connect into your existing non-motorized infrastructure, and that spine can certainly be a launching pad to start to explore other options down the road as well. One key thing is that the intent of this was really to be something that's designed to serve all users, all ages, all abilities. So something we like to say is, where would you send your unaccompanied 10-year-old on a bicycle? Kind of a nice metric to think about it from that way. So designing something that you feel safe, that people can use this as an amenity, as a way of connecting throughout the county, or through the city, excuse me. And then really coming out of our CAC group was a preference for this being off-street to the extent possible, to really make this something that's a unique and different experience for the city, and that also gets people off of the street from a safety standpoint, using bridges or other treatments to cross over heavily vehicle traffic intersections, things like that. And at the same time, we don't want to be losing opportunities to link into neighborhoods that, there may be one primary spine, but there can be other connections off of that and open spaces potentially that can be built along with this as well. Couple kind of quick design assumptions about this. We get a lot of questions in some of the public and CAC meetings. Will there be, is this going to be gravel? No, it's going to be paved. Yes, it will be lit. One of the things that's important to note is that this was not intended to be a floodplain management project. There will be stormwater management features as part of the design, but it's not principally about addressing flooding concerns. There may be opportunities to kind of do double duty as implementation happens, where we can address flooding concerns jointly with those groups and with those interests. So that's something from an implementation standpoint we need to keep in mind. A little bit about the kind of trail design itself. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. The general idea throughout all the planning of this was to say, at a minimum, let's try and identify a 30-foot wide corridor for this urban trail. Not all of that will be paved. It might be up to 20 feet of pavement in various different configurations, separation between pedestrian and bicycle traffic. That's something that we're seeing a lot in urban trails around the country. And then having at least 10 feet more if there's available land that we can get as part of acquiring an easement or part of acquiring property access to do landscaping, street trees, site furnishings, all those kinds of things that can go along with it. This is kind of a dap into that same trail within the rail corridor, recognizing that there are some critical offset dimensions that have to happen off of the rail corridor. And something that we discovered in this process, as Connie mentioned, there had always been talk about having the trail in the rail corridor. Well, the reality is the rail corridor is just not wide enough. It's generally about 50 feet wide. The track is right in the middle of it. That's 25 feet on each side. You need a minimum of 9 feet separation off the railroad tracks just for basic engineering clearance. That leaves you with 16 feet. If you're talking about 20 feet of pavement for a trail, that's not going to fit in there. It just doesn't work. So you're going to have to get onto private property or public property adjacent to the railroad anyway. So there are areas that you'll see in the plan where we are within the rail corridor, and that's generally where the rail corridor is wider and we have that flexibility. There are some sections that are on street, and why these conditions can vary pretty significantly depending upon what street we're on. The general idea is that we would widen the sidewalks on one side and create a separated bicycle facility, like a cycle track or a two-way protected bicycle facility on that side of the street, add additional landscaping, stormwater management features, that kinds of thing. The assumption is that parking would have to be removed on at least one side of the road to do that. Depending upon roadway width, it might be two-way, both sides of the road. And then the kind of last cross-section that we look at are these elevated trail and ramp sections. And generally within that 30-foot wide corridor, the idea is that if you're ramping up down at the street level, you're able to make a connection from the sidewalk with a connector trail to get you back to where that ramp section comes back to grade. So these ramps would be where we're on an approach up to a bridge, and they're designed at about 7% grade, which is enough to accommodate on average your ADA slopes and landing spots and slopes and that kind of thing. Okay, so a little bit about the framework plan itself. Really, the framework plan identifies that key kind of primary alignment, which is the broad line that you'll see on the maps that'll kind of flip through. There's some thinner lines on there that show what we're calling near-term opportunities. So, we recognize that we're not going to be able to build this all in one chunk. It's going to have to be phased over time. That said, there may be opportunities to do improvements all throughout the corridor to start to build those linkages and start to make those connections and improve safety for all users while we're waiting for these primary sections to be built. So overall for the corridor itself, and we'll zoom in on this in a second, but as Connie mentioned, feasibility was a big driver. So where can we physically fit this? Where can we plausibly get access to property? And one of the key things that we did as part of this process and working with the Treeline Conservancy is we met with almost every single property owner that's impacted by the alignment of this trail and asked them point blank, are you comfortable with this alignment showing up on a city master plan? And every property owner that's on this map that we've talked to has said yes. So that's, I think, an important thing from a feasibility standpoint. There were some properties that the owner said, no, I don't want a route shown here or a trail shown on my property, and the framework and the route alignment was adapted to reflect that. Also thinking about continuity, so how continuous is the experience? user safety, and then what are those connection points to the assets along the corridor, those destinations that we want to get to. Just for the interest of time, I'm not going to flip completely through this in detail, but generally moving from the north, this is up at by Bandimere and the Argo Bridge. Moving south, the main corridor, there's a large bridge that would cross over Main Street and the Amtrak, MDOT railroad lines and get you down to the border-to-border trail. The main branch goes south down Wilt through 721, through a private easement out onto First Street with a bridge over Miller, a connection into West Park, and then another bridge over Huron Street. It stays elevated until it comes back to grade on the 415 West Washington site, a gateway at Liberty, and then it's on street within the First Street right away. Then it goes off street, parallel to the rail tracks on private property, out onto Ashley, and then it ramps up again with a large bridge crossing over Main Street in Madison, where it drops back down to grade at Mosley. And again, we have an easement as part of the redevelopment project there. Continues south across Hill Street, down Green in an on-street connection to Hoover, east on Hoover down to State Street, and then south from State Street all the way down to the end point of this phase at Stimson. Okay, just a couple images that we developed, some concept imagery to help kind of showcase what this could look like, some of these features. So that idea of that spiral ramp and bridge just north of the existing railroad trestle going across the river and across North Main. The gateway point up at Sunset and Wilt Street going into 721. The Huron Street Bridge. If you look out of the window of the Y, if you're running on the track, that's kind of the direction that you would be looking at if you're looking north. Liberty Street Gateway along First Street. And then a bridge over South Main as well. Okay, just a few more slides. So one of the key questions on this has, of course, been implementation. How will this get funded? How will it get built? Who's going to be responsible for the maintenance and operations of this? And it's important to know that there are a lot of precedents and case studies for trails like this across the country. One of the ones closest to home is the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. So the Riverwalk in Detroit and also the DeQuinder Cut and some of the other sections of that system, of that network, that's managed and operated by a nonprofit conservancy that is able to work with the city. The city owns the land and owns the facilities, but the conservancy is responsible for raising a lot of the capital costs to cover management and maintenance. They're organizing the implementation and the construction and all those kinds of things. So I say all this because the Allen Creek, or excuse me, see, I just did it. The Treeline Conservancy has been working with Howard and with the city to develop a business plan for how to get this built and implemented, with the understanding that the Conservancy would take a lead role in the management and implementation and operations of this greenway. So their business plan that they're developing, I believe a draft of that will be available around, we're not sure when, but soon, hopefully soon. One key part of that is the governance structure, so the legal side of how ownership and management will work. Part two is the financial side of this. So how is this being funded? What's the range of funding? And that's both on the capital side as well as on the operations side. And then this is, I'm not going to cover this. This is a lot of the different maintenance activities that are anticipated. And then part three is that sort of implementation strategy itself. So, what's the phasing plan? What does that look like? Going into the details of design, the details of property negotiation with owners for getting access, securing easements, as well as then a marketing and branding strategy. And a lot of that is largely in motion already. Just a quick note about the phasing. Generally, the thought is that this would start in the north zone, which would go from the Huron River south down to that Liberty Street Gateway area, and then could continue to move south in the center section. And then the south zone is primarily university property and public roadway that it would be going next to and through. Just a quick detail on that north zone. One of the things that's important to know about the phasing of this is a lot of these chunks can happen independently of each other and still provide pretty key linkages. So for example, A is that bridge over North Main Street. That's a huge area where people are crossing the railroad tracks illegally through there, and being able to get that connection point as an early win in the connection to the border-to-border trail would be pretty crucial. We can come back to this if there's more questions about the phasing. Last, just want to touch a little bit on the cost side of it. You've probably seen the numbers floating around, about $55 million. Big price tag. That cost is just for the actual construction of the trail amenities itself. So some of the things it does not include would be any of the property acquisitions, if there's unknowns related to environmental remediation that would need to be done, or other kinds of parallel projects addressing floodplain or stormwater or things like that. That's not included in that. As we benchmark that against a lot of the other communities that have similar types of trails, the costs are in line with that. People always ask about the High Line. Wouldn't it be great if we had a High Line? Well, that's $24,000 a lineal foot to build, and they already had the elevated structure there, right? So probably not that, but in line with a lot of the other projects that we're seeing. Okay.
So our next steps are, we had our last Citizen Advisory Committee meeting this morning, and coming up on October 4th right here in City Council chambers at 6:30 is our last community-wide meeting. We are in between, interspersed and all that, we'll be meeting with other boards and commissions. Tentatively, we are planning to go to Planning Commission for their public hearing for action on this as potential adoption of the plan on November 8th. And on December 18th, the next step would be for City Council action, and that's also a to-be-confirmed date. But if we get City Council acceptance of the plan, it would officially be this, what you see would officially become part of the city's master plan. And that's all we have in terms of presentation, but Oliver and I will welcome any comments or questions you have.
So any questions? Yes.
I was wondering, when you mentioned talking to all of the residents, and then all of them said yes, except a few who were reflected in the plan. Are those yellow ones the people who said no, or are those the yellow ones? There seems like a lot of yellow.
The yellow were the ones that said yes. Those are
Right.
parcels that are, we just kind of flagged them with yellow to say, yeah, the trail, or some portion of the trail would go through the property.
Okay.
So those are ones that said yes. You'll notice on the
Let me just, because I have the mic, and I think this is being recorded by CTN. You can move up here with me, Oliver. Let me clarify what we mean when we say they said yes.
Okay.
What that really means is they were agreeable to us showing the trail alignment route through their property. But there's many steps beyond this. That's actually working with them to get an agreement, whether it's an easement, a land donation, and working with the property owners to actually get the trail in place are next steps after this plan. So we have general agreement among all of those people that they like the idea and the concept of the plan, and they, in most cases, they think it will really benefit the activities on their property.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions about the plan, but before we get to that, maybe a general answer to what exactly are we voting for in this resolution? Is it just to continue the process, or is this to endorse this master plan itself?
So there are two resolves in your resolution, and the first resolve is to ask for Transportation Commission support of the draft master plan. The second resolution is that the Transportation recommend that City Planning Commission and City Council initiate the process to adopt the plan. So to take this to the next step of those two dates that I mentioned of actual adoption of the plan.
So there will be other times potentially to weigh in for instance, getting involvement instead
Yes,
of using
yeah.
streets. Question, I noticed that there's option A and option B for on-street opportunities in the master plan.
We have the preferred route, which
Right.
is the main line, and then we have other opportunities, yes.
So, but since those are in there, that's still feasible. For instance, if 55 million plus property acquisition ends up being some enormous number, First Street might be a viable alternative to circumvent
Yes.
some of the bridges still.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right. That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I am really excited about what I saw in this document. I think it's great. It's a wonderful accoutrement for the city. I would strongly encourage us to integrate stormwater management into this. We know that it's going to be much cheaper to do it now than to have to go back and retrofit if we have any issues, even though it's going to bump that price tag up. I just would strongly encourage us
Great.
to do that.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify one thing, our cost analysis did include stormwater management for all the impervious area being created by the trail. So it is managing the water that's runoff that's being generated by the trail, and that's in alignment with the city's Green Street policy. So there was that. Additional stormwater management stuff beyond that would be an additional.
Thank you.
So seeking opportunities for that are very much in line with the thinking of the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Yes.
Connie, you mentioned speaking with the railroad companies, and you seem positive about the relationship that you're building at the moment, but I'm wondering what the feedback has been from the railroad companies and maybe what motivations they would have to sort of go along with it
Sure.
moving forward.
Good question. Watco Companies and Ann Arbor Railroad first concern is safety and liability on their rail corridor. They have significant concerns about people who are trespassing on their corridor. And we see pedestrians on the corridor, especially on game days, using the rail corridor. So Watco's very, very concerned about that trespassing activity. So they would be in favor of anything that provides an alternative, feasible alternative to that trespassing. On the other hand, they're an active freight company, and they are looking to grow their freight line in Ann Arbor. So, grow the number of cars that might use the line. They are agreeable, though, to us showing the route on the plan like we've shown, and they're aware that we're proceeding, with this alignment. So we've been completely transparent with them, and they've been willing to sit down with us on multiple occasions to talk about the options. And conversely, the city is fully aware that any future use would be contingent with concurrence with the rail company, that we haven't gotten that yes yet from the rail company, but we haven't gotten a no yet either. So I think we've developed a relationship that we need to keep building through the next steps of this project.
Well, speaking of relationships, I recall reading that the university had some issues with this. Where does that stand today?
The university portions that were shown on some previous plans that you may have seen have been removed from the plan. They have shown concern throughout the process that the trail does not complement the activities on Elbel Field, where the plan was shown, and the golf course and some of the areas on their athletic campus. So we, just like any other property owner, if they've told us that they don't want the alignment on their property, we've taken it off. So the plans have evolved based on what we've heard from property owners, because the purpose of this is to determine feasibility, what's feasible, and we have to have property access to make this feasible. So we're showing alternative routes where it's not feasible through other properties. That said, if other opportunities arise in the future that aren't exactly in line with this alignment but make it better, we'll be seeking those out as well. So,
Any other questions, comments?
I guess I have a follow-up question to that.
Yes.
Is there potential to sort of open up dialogue with the university, or is this just a kind of a blatant stamp no?
No, I would say we have had an active dialogue with the university right from the beginning. Two members of the university are on our Citizen Advisory Committee. They've attended almost every meeting. Our project team has had additional meetings with the university. We've had conversations at many levels, and it's just where it stands today that they have had concerns all along, and in the end, when you're at the point of developing a draft plan, you have to make a decision. If they are showing concerns, then we don't want to show something on their plan that would be of concern to them.
It's understandable.
I've also heard of grassroots efforts already to start pressuring the U of M, including from alumni withholding donations and things like that, so.
So we'll see what happens.
Yes. It's true.
Cool.
Any other discussion? Then can we move to the resolutions? I have to pull them up, but you have copies in your agenda. And so we'll take them separately, I think would be the most helpful thing. And so I need a motion for the first resolution, which is to support the project. Is that correct?
It reads, resolved that the Transportation Commission supports the Treeline Allen Creek Urban Trail Master Plan.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Chip Smith. And seconded by Stephanie.
Seconded by Preston. Thank you.
Great. Any discussion on this motion? Looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, say yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Well, we have that done. And then the second resolution, would be
Reads
helpful again to.
Yes. Resolved that the Transportation Commission recommends that the City Planning Commission and City Council initiate the process to adopt the Treeline Allen Creek Urban Trail Master Plan as an element of the city master plan.
Is there any discussion on this? Or do we have to have a motion?
I'll move it.
Okay.
I'll second it. Fern?
You got who that is?
Yes.
Okay.
Smith and Fern. Thank you.
Any discussion on this motion? We like it, it looks like, so. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, you have your resolutions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation.
Great. All right. And that was within a half an hour. So at this point, we have staff report and updates from Crescent.
Good evening. So, as usual, folks have the written update report in your packet. So I'll just highlight a couple of things of interest, particular interest, things that have changed since last month, and for the folks that may be watching at home. First, a couple of items of interest on the construction projects. Some major projects that have been going on this summer have been recently completed. So first off, the Stadium Boulevard reconstruction. If anyone was around the stadium game day or as it approached, we'll see that that is now all open, including the new sidewalk that was placed on the south side of the stadium there along the golf courses and extending from the bridge. So very pleased with that. And also at this time of year, as we move to the start of school, with the public schools and kids back at school, the Tier 1 and 2 safety improvements, which again, reminder, we're focused on the major streets, so particularly middle schools, high school, sign upgrades, gateway treatments, and crosswalk refreshing and enhancements were completed. And another road project, some major work we've had going on in the northeast portion of the city this summer. The Nixon Green Duvarin intersection, which was converted to a roundabout, was completed to the point that it was open for traffic immediately after the Labor Day weekend, again in time for school. So I need to make it up there myself. I've heard it's functioning very well, but I haven't made it up there. But that is now substantially complete, open to traffic, though there is still some construction work related on the periphery of it that still needs to be done. In that same general area, we've had an infrastructure project, water main replacement at the Plymouth Green intersection area that has certainly affected traffic and the roadways. That project is moving along on schedule. It's still not open through the intersection, so apologize those of you that travel through the northeast part of town, but it's currently on schedule for the intersection to be opened up by about the end of September. There will continue to be more water main work down Plymouth Road west of Green Road. So there's still going to be some more construction into this fall, but that'll be able to be done with just a lane closure. So the intersection itself will be back opened up, but still a bit of disruption yet to the end of this construction season. And then the last construction item, I'd like to touch on the Miller Maple sidewalk. Some good-sized gaps that were filled this year in the area of Miller Maple Road. The sidewalk work has been completed and actually has been opened for use, but there are some new mid-block crosswalks that are not yet open because the RFBs still need to be installed there. So that's progressing forward, and as soon as those are installed, then those mid-block crosswalks will also be fully opened. Highlighting a few items that are currently in design and planning. Again, school safety improvements. The next level or tier of projects, the tier 3, that are now getting more into the neighborhood streets and at the elementary school level. Highlight there that I would point the commission to, but quickly that the list that was put together by the A2 Safe Transit Group, looking at those schools, was submitted to the Transportation Safety Committee, and so that was accepted by the committee and is the area of items that the work is going to be identified to develop a plan for implementing improvements around those. And just, we did touch on and speak to the Pauline Boulevard project, the CIP committee, so just reiterate, look for a date in October at some point with the public meeting, so Kay will be sure to get that word out to the commission and certainly the public through the engineering department as well. And as far as other real developments in the design area for the past month, and actually tying into the tree line, I almost said greenway, is the update on the Allen Creek berm opening. So an early opportunity at the north end of the tree line route. That is a project that we are currently into design, and the plans are currently at about a 30% progress of those plans and advancing forward to both open up an opening under the railroad berm there at Depot for flood plain reduction, but also to put in a pedestrian and non-motorized connection under that railroad berm as well to provide another connection to the border-to-border trail. Then moving into other updates and items of interest. The Ann Arbor Station project, we are still anticipating, hopeful that the Federal Railroad Administration, the FRA, will allow us to release the environmental assessment document for public review. It has still not happened yet as of this moment, but we are hopeful that that will happen soon. And Kayla and the chair will get to that in a second in terms of upcoming agenda items. It's our hope and anticipation that would be coming to the commission in October, that would be out for public review at that point. And so bringing to you folks as part of that process. And I'd also like to point out an item titled Signs, Lines, and Markings, that there's an update there, a paragraph that speaks to the work that we completed at the end of this summer. We do an annual inventory of the bike line system and infrastructure through the city, do an inventory of its condition, the markings, the pavement is wearing. So there's just, rather than read through it, just direct you to there to read through that. And that's an annual ongoing item that we do. So I'd like to bring that to your attention. And since it's next on the list, I think I've got enough time. I offered Sergeant Clark an opportunity if you'd like to give an update or some information on the driver behavior study, since he and his staff have been involved with that. So I'll turn that over to Sergeant Clark here real quick.
Thanks, Crescent. We're just finishing up our third phase of the changing driver behavior study with Western. The first ticket phase, which was prior to this in August, we had 377 stops and over 300 tickets issued. Currently, we have one more day tomorrow. I don't have this afternoon's stats or obviously tomorrow's stats, but we're at 238 stops and 186 tickets. Feedback has been one side or the other. It's been either very positive or very negative, which we kind of expected. So we have 2 more weeks set to start October 30th, and that will go for 8 days, 2 shifts each day. We did have to change up our times, though, so we're not doing it at the prime times because our crossing guards are working during the prime times, and we're using them for our decoy pedestrians. So it has been, I think, very successful, and again, the feedback has been either really positive or really negative. So it just depends on what the focus is, and we've had a few court cases come up out of this, but nothing over the top. And as far as numbers wise, I think the court notices are typical for any traffic violation.
Great. Thank you, Sergeant Clark. So just the last couple of items I'd like to highlight for the commission. The State Street Transportation Corridor Study. That's an item that we've had and been working on for a bit of time. The big update here is that MDOT, the Michigan Department of Transportation, has completed their review and basically issued a concurrence with the study at this level that basically they're okay for us to move ahead and look to wrap up that study and its recommendations. So staff is looking to schedule a public meeting to provide those findings and the results of that study and provide reaction. So we'll certainly pass that date on once that gets scheduled to the commission. And then the last one that well, next to last, now that I look, but the next item, MDOT coordination in the report, I actually would suggest look at that. And that's actually myself, in my experience, something very enthusiastic about, actually, that the state has come to the city and city staff and looking to engage us and the community early in their development of their program for work at the North Main Street Rehabilitation Project. So again, perfect timing segue into the tree line. The state has on their project list a project for 2022 to come in and either minimum resurface portion, but even potentially reconstruct portions of North Main Street, basically generally the downtown, but all the way out to M14. So it's an opportunity, and they're aware that a lot of work and attention has been done by the community, including the tree line, as well as other efforts. And so we're looking to work with the community, and the city has agreed to assist with that. So really at the very early stages, just an initial meeting to make sure we're all on the same page to get that started, but we're going to be developing a list of stakeholders and start to work with the state to develop that process to help along develop those plans for that project. And then the last highlight, I'd like to point out the League of American Bicyclists and the application made for the bike-friendly community certification. Just wanted to point out in that update is an item that a survey link has been issued by the league asking for community members to participate in that process. So we've got that link provided in that document, so certainly invite and ask all you folks in the community at large to go to that survey and help us out with that process. That's it for my update.
Thank you very much. Any quick questions or comments? Yes.
Regarding the driver behavior study, it was reported in maybe an MLive article that the decoy was standing on the side opposite from where the traffic was being given the ticket, whereas the law says they have to stop if it's on the side of their lane or the person is endangered. So I'm worried that they're going to give tickets and then have to, in court, rescind all of these if they do from the opposite side.
We have, Dr. Van Houten conducted very extensive training with our decoys, our pedestrians. as well as my unit, Special Services, that were the spotters, for abiding by his instructions on how to do that. I did reach out to both our magistrate, Tamara Garwood, and Judge Valvo, who hears all our formal hearings, which are appeals of informal hearings with the magistrate, and explain what we're doing. And they're aware of the program and how it operates. And to date, I think the only tickets we've not been successful on are ones where both the spotter and the ticket writer, both officers, cannot be present. I think that's the only cases we've lost so far. So it's whatever we're doing is working and feels in compliance with the ordinance.
It's not,
Does that answer your question?
it's not in compliance with the ordinance if the person is on the opposite side.
Well, what I'm telling you is that we're complying with the ordinance. I don't know what MLive reported. I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah, they just described the scenario, which was against the ordinance, so maybe the article's wrong.
Based on what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I would say that.
Any other quick comments? Okay, thank you very much. We have time for those people who are representing organizations to say something about their liaison role and any information that would be helpful. All right. And then if any individual commission member has communications which would be relevant for the commission? I'm happy if we get to end early. Are there any next agenda items other than what we've already discussed tonight that you want to bring up? And this is not your only opportunity.
I just want to reiterate that the Pauline discussion continues at an appropriate, whenever is next appropriate. But I think that we also need to discuss, I mean, I don't know if it's up to this commission to discuss, but I at least want to make aware and potentially include it in a future agenda, how what seems like such an easy decision to be made about bicycle lanes there ends up with the opposite recommendation. So why did the non-motorized transportation plan fail in guiding city efforts?
So another way to say that would be a discussion about some of the plans that do exist and their incorporation into, I mean, that's part of what we're doing is watchdogging that. So that's,
Right.
that is in our charge.
But
And we could have an additional discussion or talk about other ways to catch those.
Yeah, I'd prefer not to catch them, you know.
Right.
Right now,
Okay.
right now, I think we're going to be debating whether or not bicycle lanes go into Pauline. We're not debating, should we include buffered bike lanes with these bike lanes we're already doing, or green bike boxes, or as Cyrus has put together, you know, a separated cycle track. There's a lot of opportunities on this one stretch of road, but
Okay,
because the
so-
recommendation came in, yeah.
So we can talk about the generic topic as well as the specifics.
Yeah.
Okay,
Eli has raised his hand.
I'm sorry.
I'd just like to point out that the development of a project is a process, and that there is no doubt that the city's adopted non-motorized transportation plan establishes the direction to staff for what's to be implemented. The issue of where we are in the plan development process relative to the committee's engagement with staff and with regard to public engagement are all factors that need to be carefully weighed as we move forward through this discussion. But I think on behalf of staff, it's important that the commission know that the city's adopted non-motorized transportation plan is the point of departure for our deliberations. And then those go through the process I described. So I appreciate the input of the committee and the commission, and I think that we have to continue to move forward in looking for the positive engagement and delivery of our plan and improvement of the plan with some of these newer concepts, including colorized bicycle lanes, cycle tracks, and the like. So I'm being as positive about the engagement. I do not want to appear to sound defensive, because the plan and the direction that we as an organization have been moving over the past decade has brought us to a point where we're springboarding to the next level, and I look forward to working collaboratively as a member of the city staff with the community and with the commission to do the best that we can, balancing the variety of interests that are out there. Thank you.
So that sets that agenda item, I think. Thanks. Any other agenda items?
So if I could just add, as far as the next meeting, the October, I think it's 16th meeting agenda, October 18th, sorry. So our commission work plan was to discuss the item planned for October was pedestrian safety and the pedestrian safety and access task force recommendations. As Crescent mentioned in the staff report, we're still waiting on the FRA approval for Ann Arbor Station to discuss that publicly. And we heard from the CIP committee specifically in your draft recommendations and interest in hearing more about Ann Arbor Station. So because that is a timely item, once we get FRA approval to move forward, we would like, I believe I mentioned this at the last meeting as well, in anticipation we might have had FRA approval and we don't yet have it, but if we do get their approval, we'd like to move that to a priority agenda item to come forward at the October meeting, which may mean that pedestrian safety discussion wait until a future meeting. We can discuss what all we can cover in one meeting. Linda, Diane, and I will work on timing for the agenda and how much we can tackle at once, but we know that there's an interest in keeping these to a reasonable amount of time, so we don't want to overload the agenda too much. So just a heads up on that. That said, if we, for some reason, don't have approval to move forward with the Ann Arbor Station discussion in October, then we would do the pedestrian safety discussion. So we had asked before for a little more clarity on what the commission is interested in discussing on that item. It was plugged into the work plan based on your feedback and interest in pedestrian safety. I know I had the email that Commissioner Preston had sent in. At that time you were out of the country, and you had shared you wanted to see a focus on looking at the task force report and what items are still outstanding that have not yet been implemented, and maybe have a discussion with the commission about which ones you're most interested in seeing move forward and making some recommendations around that. Just wanted to check, is there anything else pedestrian safety related that comes to mind to help staff in preparing what materials we would bring to you for that discussion?
I mean, maybe we could get an update on how the communication between the city and the public schools is going through the TSC. It's been problematic. So if some kind of representative of organizing the TSC could come or send an update on what they're doing to manage communication between the two bodies.
And specific to pedestrian safety relationship to, okay.
Yeah.
Look into that. Any other items related to pedestrian safety?
There's an issue with Community High School where the DDA construction project has left for this school year no way for the kids to cross to get to community. So I don't know how we put it on the agenda, but maybe some kind of update of how they can manage for the single year before the actual safe crosswalks can be implemented. How are the people going to get to school?
A review of the temporary fixes.
A review of the temporary fixes. Thank you.
Yes, Bradley?
If this relates, traffic calming came up earlier today in initial comments, and I know that the city has been trying to look at and evolve their traffic calming ordinance. Perhaps an update of where that is at could coincide with pedestrian task force. Or sorry, pedestrian safety.
Okay.
I'd also expect that the driver behavior study would dovetail well with that. Although I suppose if the pedestrian safety gets pushed off from next month, maybe there'll be, the type of update you had, a similar update next month, and I'll leave it to your guys' discretion to decide.
Great.
Okay.
If there's anything more meaningful to add.
No, that's helpful, just hearing, so we can know what to pull from as we try to prepare content that will be interesting and meaningful and worthwhile for the commission.
Anything else? So if there are no objections, then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. We need to set up a meeting soon.